I mean, Lego, and that's what this is about. She's landed a Lego sponsorship. I mean, Lego may as well just taken that money and just lit it on fire. Just light it aflame. Because Paige Bueckers not drawing anybody to buy Legos except for a very, 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 very small portion of basketball fans.
There it is. That visceral reaction tells you everything you need to know about what's happening in the WNBA right now. Because while one player is drawing 20,000 fans per game and generating $50 million endorsement deals, another player is being positioned as the league's next signature athlete, despite averaging 7th. The disconnect between marketing narrative and actual market performance has never been more obvious.
Paige Bueckers is making an unprecedented off-court impact on the WNBA. Really? Paige Bueckers is already one of the most hyped and highly anticipated players in the WNBA years before she was actually drafted number 1 overall in the 2025 draft. Bueckers' skills on the court are undeniable. Her potential to continue to grow is vast. My goodness. Okay. But Bueckers has been making off-the-court moves that are unprecedented for a WNBA player.
Let's establish some baseline facts here, because the numbers don't lie, even when the headlines try to spin them. Paige Bueckers signed with Lego in January 2025, joining partnerships with CarMax and Fanatics. The media coverage called it unprecedented off-court impact for a WNBA player. But unprecedented. Compared to what? Exactly. Because Caitlin Clark signed an 8-year, $28 million deal with Nike. Before she even played a professional game, Clark has partnerships with State Farm, Gatorade, Wilson, and Xfinity. The term unprecedented doesn't mean what these outlets think it means. The Dallas Wings averaged 7,273 fans per game during Bueckers' rookie season. Meanwhile, the Indiana Fever moved multiple games to larger venues, specifically because Caitlin Clark was drawing crowds that exceeded their home arena capacity. American Airlines Arena, where the Dallas Mavericks play, hosted exactly 0 Wings game. But you know whose games got moved to NBA arenas? I'll give you one guess. Announced several partnerships like CarMax. Here's where it gets interesting. The ratings data reveals the actual story behind the marketing push. When the Dallas Wings played the Indiana Fever on ABC in June 2024, that game drew 2.1 million viewers. Sounds impressive, until you break down what's really happening there. That wasn't a Paige Bueckers audience. That was a Caitlin Clark audience that happened to include the Wings as the opponent. How do we know? Because when the Wings played games without Clark on the other side, their viewership dropped to 1.114 million. That's a 46% decline. The article tried to spin that 1.114 million number as evidence of strong local and regional interest in Bueckers. But let's be honest about what a million viewer drop actually indicates. The audience wasn't tuning in for Dallas. They were tuning in for Indiana. Now we need to address the elephant in the room, because this marketing strategy isn't random. Paige Bueckers checks very specific boxes that make her attractive to certain corporate agendas, regardless of her actual market performance. She's a UConn product, which means she has the backing of the most powerful network in women's college basketball. She's openly gay, which makes her valuable to brands pursuing LGBT representation, and she's in a high-profile, interracial relationship with former teammate Azzi Fudd, which adds another layer of marketability in the current corporate climate. None of that is inherently problematic, but when companies prioritize identity markers over actual market impact, they're not making business decisions, they're making political statements with shareholder money. Lego isn't investing in Paige Bueckers because they expect a return on investment from increased sales. They're investing in her because she represents values they want to promote. That's their right, but let's not pretend this is about basketball performance or fan engagement. The Unrivaled League situation perfectly illustrates this dynamic. Unrivaled is a new 3-on-3 basketball league that launched in January 2025, designed as an alternative to playing overseas during the WNBA offseason. The league features 30 players competing for higher salaries and equity stakes. Sounds promising, right? Here's the problem. A'ja Wilson isn't playing. Sabrina Ionesco isn't playing. Sophie Cunningham isn't playing. Angel Reese isn't playing. And most significantly, Caitlin Clark isn't playing. The league's biggest potential draw, the player who actually moves ratings and sells tickets, declined to participate, but Paige Bueckers is there, and somehow that's supposed to generate mainstream interest. 2 days before that date, social media engagement around Unrivaled was minimal. Sports media coverage was sparse. The general public wasn't talking about it. Compare that to how the conversation would look if Caitlin Clark had signed on. It would be the dominant storyline in women's basketball. Her former teammate, this isn't about tearing down Paige Bueckers as a player. Her skills are legitimate. She was the #1 overall pick in the 2025 draft for valid basketball reasons. At UConn, she averaged 21.2 points, 5.2 assists, and 4.8 rebounds per game during her final season. She's a gifted passer with excellent court vision and a smooth shooting stroke. Her basketball IQ is high, her potential is real, but potential doesn't equal current market value. And that's the gap that these marketing campaigns are trying to artificially bridge. When you position someone as the next signature athlete, before they've proven they can draw crowds or move ratings, you're not building a brand, you're building a house of cards that collapses the moment actual performance data comes in. The WNBA has a long history of trying to manufacture stars instead of letting them emerge organically. The league pushed Brittany Griner heavily, despite her limited mainstream appeal. They positioned Alina Deladon as a face of the league, even though casual fans couldn't pick her out of a lineup. They invested enormous promotional resources in players who never generated the return the league needed. And then Caitlin Clark happened. Not because the WNBA manufactured her stardom, but because she forced the conversation through sheer performance and audience connection. She averaged 27.4 points per game at Iowa, broke the NCAA Division I scoring record with 3,951 career points, and dragged 2 consecutive national championship games to record viewership. The 2024 title game between Iowa and South Carolina drew 8, making it the most watched basketball game, men's or women's, in 5 years. That's organic star power. That's what happens when performance meets personality, meets genuine fan connection. Clark didn't need identity politics to sell her brand. She didn't need corporate agenda pushing to generate endorsements. She just needed to be undeniably excellent at basketball, while being authentically herself in front of cameras. The market responded accordingly. The contrast with Bueckers couldn't be sharp, and that contrast is making certain people very uncomfortable. Till next time, thanks for watching the show. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. So here's what this really comes down to. We're watching 2 completely different approaches to building a sports brand collide in real time. One approach is market-driven. Find the player who generates the most fan interest, the most ticket sales, the most viewership, and build around them. That's how every successful sports league in history has operated. The NBA didn't decide Michael Jordan would be their signature star through committee meetings and diversity initiatives. Jordan became that star by being so transcendent that the market had no choice but to respond. The other approach is agenda-driven. Identify the player who represents the values you want to promote, then use marketing resources to position them as a star, regardless of their actual market performance. This is what Lego is doing with Paige Bueckers. This is what certain media outlets are doing when they describe her off-court deals as unprecedented, while ignoring Caitlin Clark's vastly superior endorsement portfolio. The problem with the agenda-driven approach is that it only works in the short term. You can buy ad campaign, you can secure partnerships, you can generate headlines, but you can't manufacture genuine fan enthusiasm. You can't force people to buy tickets to games they don't want to attend. You can't make audiences watch broadcasts they find uninteresting. Eventually, the market reasserts itself, and when it does, all that artificial positioning collapses. The companies that invested in agenda over market performance end up with failed campaigns and wasted budget. The players who were positioned as stars before they earned it end up with inflated expectations they can't meet. And the fans who were told to care about something they genuinely don't care about end up feeling manipulated and resentful. That's where we are right now with Paige Bueckers. She's a talented player being set up to fail by people who care more about what she represents than whether she can actually deliver market results. The Lego deal will underperform. The Unrivaled League will struggle to find an audience. And in 2 years, we'll be having the exact same conversation about whoever the next agenda-friendly prospect is. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark will continue drawing 20,000 fans per game, generating record ratings, and signing endorsement deals that dwarf anything Bueckers secures, not because of some conspiracy or bias, but because that's what happens when actual market demand meets genuine star power. The WNBA can either learn from this and embrace market-driven star building, or they can keep trying to force narratives that don't match reality. But they can't do both. And the longer they pretend that Paige Bueckers generates the same level of interest as Caitlin Clark, the more credibility they lose with the audience they're desperately trying to grow. So ask yourself this: if you're running a company and you have limited marketing budget to invest in a WNBA player, who are you choosing? The player who draws 7,073 fans per game and checks demographic box, or the player who draws 20,000 fans per game and generates $50 million endorsement deals? Because if you're choosing the former, you're not running a business. You're running a social experiment with other people's money. And eventually shareholders are going to ask why the return on investment isn't materializing. When that day comes, all the articles calling Paige Bueckers unprecedented won't matter. The only thing that will matter is whether she moved the needle. And right now the data says that's not bias. That's just reality. And reality doesn't care about your agenda.